shot of all of the different requirements that an ACT court client will amass over their probation term. So you'll see that this individual has, six total requirements down here. Each of these is a new record, and as I mentioned, a new record will populate automatically at the bottom, so you don't have to worry about clicking anything or saying, give me a new record. The children button, I usually skip over that because it's usually not relevant. So I'll continue to skip over that. So monthly contacts, this is how we keep track of how often clients are meeting with probation. Usually, in this case, it may be with their task case manager as well, if that's something that you guys want to keep track of. So this is just looking for aggregated information or aggregated counts at the end of a given month for how often a client was seen by probation or by task that month. So this gives you the option to select the month and the year. So we're in February now, say it's the end of February and I want to enter some information. It goes by the number of the month and then whatever the year is that you're looking for. And then you would say, okay, I want to enter the records for February of 2014. What it'll give you is a list of all the clients who are enrolled and still active in the month that you selected. So in this case, we still have 5 individuals who are active as of February 2014. These fields over here give you the month and the year that you're looking at in case you need a quick reference. And this will tell you the name of the individual that you'll be entering information for. So we've got also the probation officer here, or the task case manager, whoever's contacts with clients you want to be keeping track of. And then I'll go through and we can enter the names of the individuals who you guys want in here once we set up the ACT Courts version of the database. And then we've got just 2 boxes on this end. This is the actual, so this first box here, it says number of contacts. This is the actual number of times that the individual whose record you're looking at, so this guy Hank here, this is the actual number of times he was seen in February of 2014. And then this would be required contacts. So this is the number of times he was supposed to come in, or the number of appointments that he had scheduled for this given month.
Drew, is that aggregated from other parts of the...
It's not, no. Yeah, so this is just a quick addition of data from a different source. This is another one of those places where we wanted to try and keep the workload down. So in some sites, they see clients 3 or 4 times a week. So if we had them enter information for every single time they came in, they wouldn't be having time to see their clients, they'd be entering data all day. So this is the best compromise that we could come up with to get that information without bogging down the actual users. So in this case, if this guy came in 5 times, he showed up for his probation appointments or his case management appointments, and he was good this month, he actually showed up for all of his appointments. This is just a quick way to see if somebody's at compliance or meeting their requirements with the number of times they're supposed to come in. With the contacts, Adult Redeploy is looking strictly for in-person, face-to-face contacts. So things like field visits, where staff go out into the field, work, home, school, or in-office visits. So when clients come into the office and are actually sitting down with the PO or case manager, we're more interested in figuring out the level of substantive interpersonal interaction, and that kind of gives us a proxy of how much supervision a program has and how much opportunity for change there is at a given program. So as I mentioned before, we deal with a number of different sites that have different program models, different caseload sizes, and all manner of differences. So one thing that we also recently added is an option to narrow down the list of clients at the end of the month when contacts are being entered. So we have monthly by client ID. What this is doing is it allows you to select a specific client that you want to enter information for, rather than scrolling through a giant list of every person who's active in the program. So let's say the ACT Corps gets 100 people in the program at any given time. On that monthly contacts form, there will be 100 names on that list that somebody's going to have to scroll through. With this form, this allows you to select a specific individual and see their reporting history. And then at the bottom, it gives you the opportunity to enter a new month and a new year. So we'll say 2014. All right, so I'm going to be entering my records for that guy for that month. I'm going to select my name from this list. And this lets us know, having the officer name or the case manager name gives us an idea of caseload size at any given point in time. And then, all right, we'll say he came in 3 times this month and he was supposed to come in 3 times this month. If you want to select another individual, I've got the same month in there twice. So if you see anything like this, it's just saying there's a blank record here. I'm not going to be able to save a blank record because there's nothing entered. You can just hit OK, and it'll say, okay, I still can't save it because there's nothing there, and that's fine. Nothing's broken. It's just access speak for saying you can't save nothing. And then the other option that we have for entering those contacts is by staff ID. So this one is if the program has multiple staff that are responsible for supervising clients, so multiple probation officers or multiple case managers in this case, this allows you to select my caseload and see the clients that are on my list, and then as well the same month and year information, and the same number of actual contacts and number of required contacts. The only thing to keep in mind if you want to use this form is that you first need to attach the individual's name, so the officer or the case manager's name, to a client. So in this case, you would have to say, okay, I want to make sure that this client here, Tony Stark, is attached to this probation officer. And then that lets the program know that, okay, that this client is going to show up in this officer's list when I'm going through that way, through that monthly by staff ID. Because there's that extra step involved, I recommend that people entering this information use the monthly by client ID. It's just a quicker, easier way to go through it, and you don't have to remember to take that extra step. But again, I'll leave that up to the individual and their preferred workflow. So next form, yeah.
I'm a little lost on where we are in the packet. Are there corresponding pages for this?
There aren't. I don't think I've ever thought
that
far ahead. So
better that there are no pages than there are pages.
Yeah, there should be page numbers on there, right? It took me 2 years to add page numbers to it. So
it was 24 and 25.
24 and 25.
Oh, okay.
You know what? That's a good idea. I should look through that and make sure that my training corresponds to that.
It's been going right along into this S. Until we skip the child.
Oh,
Right after
okay.
the child.
Yeah. Good stuff. Okay, well thanks for doing that. That's good food for thought. So I'm hoping that LSIR is next on that list. If I'm right, then awesome. So this is pretty self-explanatory. This is the standard assessment that is used on intake at probation across the state. Am I off on the page?
It's 22.
22. All right. So this is, we don't have access to the actual paper forms that get filled out for these domains. The proprietor of the LSIR is pretty, they like to keep that in-house. So we've worked with a couple different probation departments to get this set up to be accurate in terms of the domains and the top scores for those domains. So this form up here, you'll see that we've got always at the top of all the forms, there's the individual's name that you're working with. In this field, the first thing that should be entered is the date. So this is the date that the assessment was actually taking place. LSIR purpose, there are a number of reasons why somebody would be getting an assessment done. Usually for you guys, since you won't be getting clients coming from an existing probation case, ARI intake is going to be the reason or the purpose of the assessment. So this is their sentence from court, they're coming into probation intake, and the LSIR is being done after intake. That would be the purpose of this particular assessment for this individual. And then we have the domains and the scores on those domains. So we have it set up so that it gives a reference of what the top score is here in this middle column. And then it'll auto-calculate the total entered at the bottom, which is what that risk score at the end of the assessment is going to be. I did get some feedback last time I was doing this from a site that it looks like our domains here are combined in some cases. So on the actual paper form or in the actual LSIR instrument itself, I believe education and employment are separated out into two domains. In this case, they're combined. So this would be if you're looking at the LSIR and you say, oh, there's an education one and an employment one, it would just be adding those two scores together and inputting that score here. I know there may be one or two others that are combined, and it's the same concept. If you see two different domains on your paper form and one domain here, you just sum the two scores and pop those in the box. The most important part of this, aside from the date, is going to be the assessed risk level and if there's an override on the risk level. Adult redeploy and evidence-based practices in general are meant to be focused on medium to high risk individuals. So adult redeploy is responsible for making sure that high risk or moderate risk individuals are coming into the program. So the assessed risk level is going to be the score that they get based on, or the risk level that's assigned based on what the instrument says fits into that total score. So I know some counties do lower the bar for, say, a high risk individual. So they say, you know, the LSIR says 32 is a high risk, but we're going to say 30 is a high risk because we want to treat those people as high risk. This would be whatever risk level is assigned to the scores that Cook County follows. We also are aware that sometimes probation can override a risk score. So if there are individual cases where probation or somebody else has access to information that is not in the LSIR and an override of the LSIR score is going to be implemented, this would be where you indicate that override. And it'll show you here what the risk level is and then what the override is. And So I'm familiar with the reassessment time frame for the LSIR being between, I believe it's 6 and 12 months. So the people who made the LSIR recommend a reassessment take place every 6 months. I know that doesn't happen all the time. So whenever that reassessment is done and a new LSIR is going to be added, you can just click create or new record down here and it'll pop up with a blank record. So everything here is blank, ready to be filled out. The only difference would be instead of intake, it would be routine reassessment if it's going to be that 6 or 12 month period. And I also am aware that in some cases a new LSIR can be assessed if there's some major circumstance change. So if an individual gets married or gets a job or has a death in the family, and in some cases even gets rearrested, we want to know what the reason is behind a reassessment. So the next form is going to be non-compliance. Am I on the document again? I'm curious now.
I think that goes back.
Yeah.
All right, I'll have to.
Yeah.
It goes to 18.
Okay. See, this is just my way of making sure everybody stays awake. So we've had a little bit of difference of opinion with some of the sites and some of the probation departments. The wording that we use is meant to be kind of general and not very specific. Terminology varies across counties, and rather than trying to remember what the probation department in Kane County calls something and then what the probation department in the Second Circuit calls something, for things like this, we refer to any non-compliance as a violation, so it falls under that broad category. In your case, a violation may mean something very formal or very specific, where if you're filing a violation, you're filling out paperwork, you're bringing it in front of the judge, and it's a person has a court date set. And that's very different from, say, a routine non-compliance where that's handled administratively on the probation side. What this form is looking to capture is both of those. So things that are handled formally with a formal court proceeding and things that are handled informally by probation or some other informal means. So don't get hung up on the wording in here. This is just a way for us to capture that rule violation or non-compliance, whether it's formal or informal. So the violation date up here, this is the date that if something formal is happening, like a violation is going to be filed in court, this would be the date that that was filed. If it's something less serious, it would be the date that probation is addressing it in an office visit or some other type of contact. You'll see we've got a list here of different types of negative behavior and non-compliance. It's really hard to see on the screen, but you should have the options on the document. Everything here is a checkbox, so that allows you to select multiple things. We recognize that a lot of things can happen in one individual instance. So the checkbox allows you to select anything that may have happened that's being responded to. There's also a number box at the end, and that allows you to say, okay, well, in this case, this individual, say he failed 4 drug tests, and we're writing him up for that, or we're addressing that with this instance right here. Or in this case, he didn't have documentation of where he was living twice when he came in for visits. Generally, those numbers are used when the date range is used here. So the date range allows you to avoid having to enter a new record for every single instance that happens, because a guy could have a lot of things happen in a given period of time. So if you have, say, this guy here went on some kind of spree during the month of December. So between December 1st and the 28th, he picked up a new felony arrest, a new misdemeanor arrest, missed verifying his residence twice, and then failed 4 drug tests. So this date range here and these numbers let us know the context of what happened. So we can see that, okay, not all of this happened in one day. This is over the course of 27 or 28 days. The instructions down here mention that if you're using the date range, so you're tracking a large number of things that happen in one record, be sure to enter this end date as the violation date as well. When some of the reports that we have written or run, it's looking for that violation date, and if there's nothing in there, but there's a date in the end date, it won't capture it. So this is a way to make sure that this information gets caught in some of those reports that are run. So the other side of this form here is just the response to that instance of non-compliance or that violation. We have a number of different types of sanctions here, both formal, so things that are addressed in court or that come down from a judge, as well as informal or administrative sanctions that generally are things handled in probation or maybe during a staffing or something like that. And again, they're all check boxes, so if multiple things, if there are going to be multiple responses to a single incident, the check boxes allow you to select multiple things. One of the more interesting, or the things that we're interested in looking at, especially in Cook County, is utilization of jail as a sanction. In a lot of counties, jail space is very limited. So we've had requests from a number of sites, as well as some other administration at the sites, to be able to capture how many jail days are being taken up by individuals. So we have the option here for jail, and then an option to enter the number of days that an individual is sanctioned to jail. If something that's not on the list comes up, we've got the other text box down here, and you can just, again, give a quick 2 or 3 word explanation for what the other sanction was.
Sure. I'm wondering, in the other ARI programs, does someone, you mentioned that normally the probation officer is the one entering the bulk of this data. Are they doing that during the court call typically, or do they take sort of like a stack of documents back and is there a lot of things going on in this particular one?
Yeah, in my experience, it's generally after the fact. So they have the documents and they sit down. In some sites where we have the database in use right now in DuPage County, and that's probably the largest site that's using the database. They have 4 probation officers, and their workflow now, they've been using this for 2.5 years or so, is to take a day towards the end of the week when they otherwise are doing a staffing or something that they're not supervising clients, and carve out time to kind of fill in information. If you guys and your officers have access to laptops or to some other way to enter this, and they want to be doing it as it's happening, or you want them to be doing it as it's happening, that's perfectly fine as well. The database supports multiple people, multiple users at the same time. I think it's like up to 20 or 50 or something. So as long as they're all using the same exact file, then it's fine to have 2 people, 2 officers, or 2 case managers sitting there entering information at the same time. What I usually recommend, especially with multiple users, is housing the database on a networked server. That allows multiple users to access the same exact copy. The way access works is it assigns a unique identifier to each case. If you have 2 different copies of the database, you'll have the same unique ID attached to 2 different individuals. When you try to combine them, so you say you've got John Smith over here with ID 1, and then you've got John Smith, the same guy, with ID 2. When you try to bring them together, it creates a pretty big issue merging them. So that's why we recommend everybody works off of 1 copy.
And the remote, the web-based server idea is still...
We kind of put off testing it once we heard that the IT wanted to house it on their system. It's still, like I mentioned in the email, something that we're looking at doing eventually. If that's something that you guys want to push for, we can restart the testing on it. I know our programmer, our developer, was testing specific tables in the online environment. And if that's the way we want to go, we can have him test the entire database in there, and we can start pursuing that option as well. But that's something we can work with IT later to figure out. Any other questions on this form? All right. So the next form is something that we recently added, and you guys are the first ones to see this form. And this is a way to track incentives and rewards, so kind of the opposite of the previous form. This is good things that the clients are doing, and then good things that you guys are giving them, or bad things that you're taking away as a response to that positive behavior. So see, it's kind of laid out similarly as the previous form. We've got the date that a positive behavior and a reinforcement was issued, and the same type of thing. If over the course of December, the person did a bunch of good things, they were showing up to all their appointments and had clean drug tests, and you want to enter all the good stuff that they did and all the positive reinforcers or negative reinforcers that you guys issued over the course of that month. We have the same date range field over here. And again, this is all check boxes. So you'll see that it looks like some of these are pretty similar. So participating in treatment groups and then progress in treatment groups. On its face, that looks pretty similar, but in treatment settings, as I understand, they're actually pretty different. So you can have a person who comes in and just sits in the back corner of the group, doesn't participate at all. If they start actually speaking up and participating, that's what we're looking for. If there's going to be some kind of reinforcer. So if task is saying, oh, we're getting good reports from treatment, maybe you want to give this guy an attaboy or a pat on the back or something. Progress in one of those would be something like they're completing steps, like with moral recognition therapy, which I think you guys are going to be implementing. They're set steps, so they're going from step 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. So there is kind of a fine distinction between participation and making actual progress. And there are some more general things in here, like if they got a job or if there were any other type of pro-social activities, like they're volunteering their time or they're helping old ladies cross the street or something like that. We have all those different options. And again, if there's something that's not on the list that you guys want to track, we've got the other box, and you can just give us a quick few words. The rewards or incentives, we have both positive and negative reinforcement. So positive reinforcement being you're giving them nice things, negative reinforcement being you're taking away bad things. So in the context of a negative reinforcement, that would be something like reduced reporting, reducing court fees or fines, and reduced court appearances. So those are bad things that most people don't like having to deal with. And if the program's taking those away, that's good for the individual. With the gift cards here, I'm not sure if that's something you guys will be doing, but we have an option to put the amount of the gift cards. So we can kind of place a dollar value on what's going on here. And again, same thing. If there's something not on the list, there's an other text box to give us an explanation. What's next on the document? We'll go that way.
Cool.
Unless they are.
All right. After that.
Monthly contract.
Drug test? Drug test. All right. So drug test is another very simple, straightforward form. This is where we're keeping track of when an individual is dropped and what the result of that drop is. So it's 3 easy pieces of information. Whatever the date of the test was, the result of the test, and then if it's a positive test, what substance the individual tested positive for. Projector placement's kind of unfortunate. So a lot of the sites use different drug testing procedures. I'm not sure what you guys use here, but we have pretty much all the options covered. Do you guys, are you going to be using like a call-in system, or is it just going to be when they come in for probation appointments, or random?
In this first phase, it's just going to be appointment, and then what their treatment provider does, I think is what we're limited to right now. Eventually, I'm not sure. There's been some discussion about the call-in. Yeah, that's what the rap court does.
Yeah. Yeah.
Color code.
Yeah, a lot of sites use the color or some type of group designation to call in, and they have to call before a certain time. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
They have a calling number, and then Monday through Friday, there's a designated color for a group. Mondays, purple, and all those call-ins, it's purple day. If you're purple, get down and do a drop.
Has that been working pretty well?
So far.
So since it sounds like you guys are kind of still determining that, I'll just run through these options real quick. So with the call-in system, there's an option up here. If a client's supposed to call in, say their group comes up today, and they didn't call the line. Yeah, so that in most cases is considered a positive test or some type of violation. If they actually called in and they knew they were supposed to drop, but they didn't show up for the test, so they said, you know what, I was using last night, I don't want to get busted, I'm not even going to show up, they've got did not appear for test. In your case, in the immediate future, where you're testing on the date they come in for their appointment, if they don't show up for the appointment, it would be did not appear for test because they didn't show up, obviously. Refused or failed to provide a sample after appearing. So we hear that this happens occasionally. Somebody will come in and say, oh, you know what, I don't have to pee, or you know what, I don't want to take the test, I'm not doing that today. It does happen, so we've got the option for that. And then with some of the panels, the drug testing panels that are used, they're able to tell if the sample's been adulterated or anyway, or if it's somehow abnormal. In many cases, it'll give a metabolite level, so creatinine is the one that I hear all the time. Or it'll say the temperature is off, it's not body temperature, or the sample was diluted. So in those cases, if the test or the panel that's being used is able to detect those abnormalities, we've got provided an adulterated or diluted sample. So in those cases, that would be the sample is clean otherwise, but there's something fishy going on. We're going to look deeper into it. Failed the test, positive test, so that's if substances were detected in the sample. Our programmer likes his wording choices. So when I told him it was a drug test, he's like, oh, so they pass if they don't drop positive. And it's like, well, not necessarily pass, but yeah, I get what you mean. So you'll see if they pass the test, all requirements met, that's a negative test, no substances detected. The last option, did not take the test, excused. That's if an individual, say, has a valid prescription for a medicine or a medication that will show up as a positive on the drug test. If you know that, it's documented, and you're excusing that positive test because you have the documentation, that would be this option here. So did not take the test, excused, or if they did drop and you know that it's going to be positive because they have their prescription, that would be this option. So in this case, only these last two, pass the test or excused, are going to be considered as negative tests or good results. Everything else, so if they fail a test, it's adulterated, they didn't drop, or they didn't even show up, those, when I'm counting, I'm going to consider negative things. So those are considered positive tests in pretty much every probation department I've spoken to. So if a positive test happens, so this guy here on 11/15/2013 had a positive test, it'll allow you to enter the substances that were detected. one thing I'll point out is the checkboxes are kind of in a weird location. The checkbox is after the drug. Usually our convention is, to have the box in front of something. Given the spacing issues on this form, that's how it worked out. So when you're entering information on a positive test, I recommend just clicking on the actual substance. So, this guy here tested positive for PCP and marijuana. So if you click on the actual word, it'll populate the correct checkbox. And that's my recommendation for this form, so you don't get mixed up and put the wrong substance in. One question that I've had is, well, what do we do to track levels of a substance? So in that case, we have the other box down here. So if you want to track levels or you want to make any other type of note on a drug test, you can select the other and just type in the level and the unit or whatever other note you want. An example of why you would want to do this is if you have somebody who is a marijuana user and that substance stays in the system for a while. If you want to see if their levels are going down on subsequent tests, you can record the level in here and you can see, okay, over the last 3 tests, the level's gone down. That indicates that he stopped using. We'll wait for that to cycle out of his system, and then if if that level goes up, we'll ding him on it. We'll write up a violation or sanction him. If it keeps going down, then we're good to go. So that's preemptively how you would handle levels or any other type of notation on a drug test.
Jordan, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Does ARI care about that? In terms of, for research purposes, do you?
Not specifically, no.
Okay.
So for adult redeploy, we're interested in the results of the test. So is it positive? And then even at that point, initially we're not interested in the substance that was tested positive for, but eventually we will be looking at that because that gets, again, to the types of substances that are used in different jurisdictions, and being able to actually quantify the problem is a big thing that we would like to be able to do. So the amounts, the levels, we're not initially interested in. Like I said, we do have sites that like to track certain things. We've tried to set it up so that it's there if you want to use it. If you don't, you don't have to. So I'll leave that up to you guys to decide.